expected, no agreement. A deal was never on the cards because you can't agree to end a war if the victim isn't present. There are things to say about the details, and there are things to say about the issues. On the human details, the feel, the textures, I mean, clearly Trump was very effusive, extraordinarily so in his greeting of Putin. And I was very struck by the contrast with his performance in the press conference afterwards, when he was notably deflated. He spoke for barely 3 minutes, unlike Putin, who pretty much dominated that event. It's also interesting that the format was not a one-on-one, and that it was much shorter than expected, around half the time that I think the White House had indicated would take place, and no lunch. And that's symbolically important because, I mean, in diplomacy, breaking bread together is a particular form of hospitality that's always sort of signified a sort of degree of sort of success and warmth. And you'll recall that it was the lunch with President Zelensky that was cancelled immediately after that disastrous Oval Office meeting. So there's something there that suggests that it was, from Trump's point of view, far from ideal. That it's not only that he didn't get the result that he wanted, but there was something that caused the whole thing to be difficult to present, even as a kind of an interim step in a successful direction. On the substance of the issues, the fact of the meeting alone, and that there was no open sort of bust up, is clearly a victory for Putin. The optics of being greeted in that way by Trump, and that's an important win for Putin. But as before, and I think more explicitly than and directly than we've seen, there is this clear underlying incompatibility in the way that the two leaders are framing the problem of the war. Trump's urgent intention is to achieve a ceasefire. That's the term he's constantly used, to stop the fighting as quickly as possible. Putin frames it in very different terms, as a solution that requires what he calls an addressing of the root causes of the war. And that's code for a much larger geopolitical agenda that would not only, in effect, pave the way for Ukraine's subordination to Russia, but bring about some longer-term, larger restructuring of European security on Russia's terms. That's really the extent of his ambitions. And that's not something that he is rushing to achieve. It's a firm and fundamental goal. And so in respect both of sort of timescales and also underlying ways of understanding the war, what's needed to solve it, that incompatibility clearly came out. I think perhaps the most significant, specific, and if you're European, worrying phrase to be uttered at that press conference was, I think it was Putin warned Europeans not to torpedo the process, the diplomatic process that has begun, and both sides agreed would continue. So Putin's clear intention now is to keep the diplomatic process on track and confined to a strictly bilateral basis. So no interference by the Europeans or the Ukrainians. That's be very unwelcome to Russia. For this to be a process that continues and gradually, in Putin's ambitions, wins around Trump to his Putin's concept of an end to the war, which would satisfy his larger and profoundly revisionist agenda for the continent. Trump's position has always been, we need to stop the fighting as quickly as possible. He has repeatedly used the term ceasefire. He has repeatedly demanded that of both sides. He has repeatedly warned and threatened Russia with severe consequences if Russia does not agree to a ceasefire. That was the deadline that expired on the 8th of August. Putin had to agree to a ceasefire or face an escalation of sanctions. That has always been the defining feature of Trump's demands. Very simple demand, but very clear. If he's now rowing away from that, moving towards a different view that a ceasefire no longer has to precede the negotiation of end to the war, but that a negotiation has to take place while the fighting is going on, and that the end of the fighting can only be achieved once a much larger geopolitical agreement has been reached. That suggests that Trump's thinking and his position are in some fundamental way shifting towards Putin's. So that's a profound worry. Well, the first thing to say is that it's a pretty extraordinary position to adopt as a proposal, in other words, as a request to Putin. What Trump is in effect doing is to ask Putin whether it's okay with him that the United States agrees a certain form of relationship, and specifically security guarantee, to America's own partners. That shouldn't even be part of the conversation with the aggressor in this major war. It's America's business and no one else's what form of guarantee it offers to European partners. So again, there's something very, very alarming going on here that really shouldn't be happening. The second thing is that anything that dilutes a NATO guarantee is favorable to Putin. Recall, this is not even a matter of Trump asking or discussing with Putin Ukraine's future status in NATO or not. That would be worrying enough. But what seems to have been discussed is the form of American security guarantee to European forces that might be deployed in Ukraine. That is a matter for European and American discussions. It's astonishing that Trump should be seeking Putin's approval for an entirely intra-NATO, intra-European security question.